lot of people, Jerami Grant leaving the Denver Nuggets to go to the Detroit Pistons, where it was reported that he was told he would have more of a role in the offense. And boy, he absolutely has. Scoring average has gone way up. But there's other people to consider here. I don't know if everybody feels that he is the odds-on favorite right now. Should he be the odds-on favorite right now? Should there be other guys you consider, whether it's Julius Randle, who's having an all-star season, has had a lot of improvement, Christian Wood, who went from Detroit to Houston. A lot of guys I think you can really consider in this field. So I'm going to ask the guys, do they like where things are right now with Jerami Grant as the odds-on favorite, or is there somebody else they'd rather put their money on that's better value and they should be looking at? I'm going to start first with you, Murph, on this. Do you like Jerami Grant as the odds-on favorite, or is there somebody else you'd rather put that money on that you think is a lot better value than Mr. Grant?
Hey, I get why Jerami Grant is the favorite. His totals have gone, way up. He's a career 10.4 rebound, 1 assist guy, and this season he's averaging 25, 5, and 3. So that's a huge improvement. So I get that, but he's also on an 8-20 team. They're not going anywhere. No one talks about him. So I would look elsewhere. And also his odds aren't that great because he's, what is he, minus
182, anywhere from minus 143, which PointsBet has minus 200 with DraftKings.
Right. So why not go with someone who also, has shown great improvement, but has odds at plus 2,500, anywhere from plus 2,500 to plus 3,000, which is a person you just named, Julius Randle. His career averages are 17, 9, and 3. This season, he's 23, 11, and 6 on a team that looks like they're going to, at least make the play-in game, or whatever it is, the play-in series for the playoffs in the Knicks. And, it's the Knicks. They're in, they're in a larger market. The Knicks are always a story, and they should be a story this year because they're actually playing well. So I would go Julius Randle with those great odds because he's going to get more attention than Jerami Grant will.
That's a good one there. I think you brought up something really good, Murph, in terms of winning. Jarod, does winning matter here in terms of when you evaluate Jerami Grant and his odds? Will it matter for any of these players that are in the conversation for most improved?
I mean, it should, but generally speaking, it doesn't, right? What usually ends up happening is, teams, whoever jumps up in the scoring averages and the counting stats, that's who wins most improved player, right? We see it all the time. I know Bryan rails on that when like a top 3 pick all of a sudden goes from, 10 points to 20 points. He's like, he's a 3 pick. What did you expect, right? So I get that, right? And so the odds on Jerami Grant, so I wouldn't do it. Murph did mention Julius Randle. I love that, obviously, because, again, bigger market. So the Knicks are going to be talked about. People are like, the Knicks play in, playoff. We love that. Someone else I'm looking at, though, too. Chris Boucher of the Toronto Raptors at plus 2,500. That is definitely worth a flyer because here's what's happening. The Raptors are starting to play good basketball again. They now, in the 7 or 6 seed? And look, say what you want. Kawhi's gone, blah, blah, all that. They still got championship pedigree, right? Them dudes all went to the finals, right? So they ain't scared of nothing, and they know what's up. And it's as high as plus 300, plus 3,000, on FanDuel. Look at his numbers. 61% effective field goal, 64.8 true shooting. He's averaging 14, 7, and 2. This is a guy who was a G League MVP and G League DPOY in 2019. If the Raptors continue to play well, Boucher is going to be a huge part of that. He's definitely worth a flyer.
That's definitely a good point because what you're talking about there is you're actually seeing development within the organization, which should matter somewhat to most improved player. All right, Bryan, I guess the only question we have for you is which Miami Heat player are you going to put your money on for this?
All right. There's no Miami Heat player we're talking about in this category. There are a couple, man. All right. There are a couple players worth bringing up. Chris Boucher is one of them, absolutely, because my barometer for most improved player is typically who actually looks like a most improved player, not just the same version as last year and their stats look better. That's kind of where Colin Sexton is for me, and his odds are a little bit higher than I think they should be. As much as I do like Colin Sexton at this point, and he's had a very good third season, but at the same time, he's not somebody that excites me in terms of this award, and the Cavs aren't winning enough. That's my problem with Jerami Grant. The stats are there, obviously, but it's also a lot of good stats, bad teams. Somebody has to be able to get these stats. He's somebody who's evidently could create his own shot, so he's able to do it on a team where the roster construction doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like somebody has to do it. It just so happens to be him. And unless they win some games, it's not a serious bet for me. Julius Randle is probably my front runner. Murph already talked about that. He looks like a different guy to me this year, and he's playing winning basketball on a team that's in the playoff race. Somebody that I would throw some money on also is Dejounte Murray of the San Antonio Spurs, who looks like a much better version of what he could have been pre-ACL, which was a while back. This year, he's really stepped it up. His odds are pretty enticing as well. And the Spurs are 16-11, 6th in the Western Conference. So he's obviously contributing to winning basketball on a team that also has DeMar DeRozan playing at a high level who may get traded. So those numbers might actually go up some more. So Dejounte Murray is somebody who could benefit from the trade deadline because DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, they have guys that could be moved, and he looks to be their point guard of the future. So Dejounte Murray is my sort of sleeper pick here, I guess I would say.
That's a good one with Murray. Now, all of you guys seem to value winning in terms of this, but we heard Jarod talk about the fact that most of the way this thing usually goes is, hey, people look at that huge uptick in scoring average, and that's how people end up voting on this awards. If betting on this, do you then consider how people may vote if this is traditionally how we've seen the writers vote on this? Does that influence any way how you guys might put your money on any one of these players? Jarod, I'll start with you on this.
A little bit. If that's the case, then I would definitely go back to Randle, right? Because again, he's in a market on a team because market size matters too, right? The Knicks are going to be talked about a lot. And Lord help us if they make the playoff. That's all the media market's going to be talking about, which is a big thing. I know it's going to make you happy, Dex. So that's huge, right? And then a place like Toronto, unfortunately, while they have a championship pedigree, I don't really talk about them. So if you're talking about money, yeah, Boucher for sure. I'm sorry, not Boucher. Randle, excuse me.
Randle for sure. What about you too, Murph, on that? Are you in any way influenced by how we've seen things voted on traditionally? Although things can change. We do not have to follow tradition. As I know Bryan will rock with me on that. Things can change. But does this influence any way you might put the money in terms of voting on this award?
Yeah, I think it has to. I think you have to look at, traditionally how the award is given out. I just feel like this, for some reason, I feel like this season there are more guys to choose from. Usually, there's one or two guys that stick out, and it doesn't really matter what team they're on because there's not much to choose from. I feel like this year you have more guys to choose from. A jump like Randle is not something you see every day. Yes, Jerami Grant had his jump is a little bit higher from point total, rebound total from year to year, but Randle, his jump is pretty significant also, and he just happens to be in a better market and he happens to be on a better team. So I think if it's close, that's when you start to look at, the record of the team, the success of the team and all that. And here is a situation like that where it's close. So you can look in other areas for excuses why to give it to someone else.
That is going to be interesting how people break the tie. What about for you, B? If it's close in a certain area, are you going to say, hey, I'm going to maybe put more money on this guy in a way that people may traditionally vote for this? Or are you looking for a separation in terms of being like, hey, Julius Randle could pass this guy? Or like you mentioned before with Dejounte Murray, right?
Yeah.
What opportunities he can have if some players get traded that might actually affect his numbers. Or those are things people should keep an eye on, right?
Yeah, and you brought up a point about just sort of the narrative of this, and these are all, at the end of the day, narrative-based awards to some degree. Like, we can sit here and talk about this person's won this amount of MVPs, this person's won this amount of Sixth Man of the Year awards, but, like, they'll all come down to narrative-based awards because the people voting for them are media members. And we have to also consider, like, how are they going to vote? Who's the guy that is getting a lot of attention? Who's sort of the trendy pick? And when it comes down to it, like, that'll sort itself out, toward the end of the season. And the favorite in that category for me would be Julius Randle if the Knicks do wind up a playoff team, because that would just be a great narrative for a team that people have been waiting to be good and interesting for a long time.
Agree. I think a lot of you guys bring up great points on this and why this is just a difficult year to look at betting. And even with awards and narratives, there's a lot to absolutely consider. I just want to remind everybody, you can please join in the conversation with us. Send in your comments, your questions here in the YouTube chat. We will answer as many of them as possible. Also want to remind everybody that when you're shopping for betting lines, you can use the propsnetwork.com live odds comparison tool. How you do that in terms of NBA games, you go to propsnetwork.com/NBA. You can see all the different spreads and payouts from all the best legal sportsbook, all in one place. Not a bad tool to use at all. It's Friday night. We like to talk about the games